Welcome into Sportsmemo's college basketball betting podcast for Tuesday, January 22nd. We're breaking down tonight's card, plus look ahead at Wednesday's college basketball card with our handicapper of the day, Robbie Veno, who, Robbie, is 21-5, 80% his last 9 days in college basketball, heating up on the college basketball hardwood. Rob, welcome into the podcast. How are you?
I am good today, Drew. How about yourself?
I'm good. We got a bunch of games we're going to talk about on tonight's card and the look ahead to tomorrow's card. So excited to get your opinions on these games. And guys, it's $2 Tuesday. So Robbie's premier total in college basketball tonight, normally priced at $25, is just $2 on sportsmemo.com. You don't need a coupon code, don't need to call anybody. It's just right there on the front of sportsmemo.com. You can get his CBB premier total of the night for just $2. So if you've been waiting to check out Sports Memo, today's a great day to do it for just $2. Following Robbie in a great play tonight. One that I like, I've personally bet. So join in on the fun, sportsmemo.com for just $2. Robbie, at the top of tonight's card, we got 601, 602. The Auburn Tigers on the road in South Carolina, in Columbia, laying 8.5 or 8, depending where you're shopping. 151.5 the total. How'd you look to bet this SEC matchup tonight, Robbie?
Yeah, it's interesting, Drew. This is this podcast as we go through today is going to be a little SEC heavy because I happen to choose 3 SEC games to talk about here, starting with this one. Auburn, they're receiving a lot of money here today in this particular contest, and I guess you would attribute it to coming off the tough loss against Kentucky on Saturday. What a hard-fought game between those two where Kentucky prevails in the end. Auburn made the big comeback, fell just a little bit short. Now they go on the road to South Carolina. We see the bump from opener of 7 up to 8.5. Now, not so sure I could get involved at that price, Drew. To me, there is a little bit of hangover for a team that puts forth that much effort as Auburn did to come all the way back at home in front of a very, very excited crowd and then fall short. So situationally, I don't think it's the best spot for Auburn, 3 days later to be going on the road to a South Carolina spot where Frank Martin has had his troops playing a little bit better as of late for sure. They didn't start the season that well, but they've played better as of late. And, you can't really like dragging Auburn's defense on the road. I mean, this is a defense that ranks dead last in effective field goal percentage inside that conference, 14th worst out of all 14 teams. So South Carolina, which has shown a tendency to be able to score some points and shoot the ball a little bit better lately against this guard-oriented Auburn team. Like I said, I just can't get there with Auburn at this price. Total has come down from 54 to 151.5, I think is what we're showing right now. And I think you can understand that a little bit. For Auburn, you could see a hair bit of emotional fatigue. And if you get one, lower scoring half here, it's very difficult to get back up over a total in the 150. So for me, likely a game to leave alone. I think one of the real reasons why you can't play South Carolina here is they've been so poor at home against the spread, 2-7 against the number. But as I mentioned earlier, a higher scoring team since conference play has started, and particularly at home where they're 6-2 against the number. So maybe the total's fallen enough to where you could get involved with the over right now. Auburn's bad defense, South Carolina's tendency to score at home. But I just don't know that either way is a great play at this point in time.
Yeah, Robbie, also the total fell a little bit. There was a quote I read last night. Bruce Pearl said Wyoming zone earlier in the year he saw gave US or South Carolina trouble, and it kind of leads you to believe Auburn might run a little bit of zone against the South Carolina team that struggled from the floor. And as total bettors will know in college basketball and really at any level of basketball, zone is gold for unders. So 4 or 5 point move might be a little bit attributed to that quote, do you think?
Oh, absolutely, Drew. I mean, just the mere mention of zone means slower game. Possessions are a little bit longer unless you have the capability to shoot over top of the zone for South Carolina right now. they're not necessarily that team. 32% from three-point land inside SEC play, so they're not necessarily a good shooting team, although their ability to score inside might help. You can get to the center of those zones. You can take advantage of Auburn a little bit just because of the shortage of big men. So we'll see how Frank Martin plays this. Obviously, he's a head coach who wasn't born yesterday. And, if you have the components to solve a zone, perhaps the players can execute it. We'll see how it goes. But certainly any time, we see it every night in college basketball. And when coaches move to zones, it kind of frustrates a lot of teams. And perhaps Auburn can frustrate South Carolina in this one.
Robbie, we got 6:19, 6:20 up next, 7 p.m. Eastern tip in the Big 12. Texas Tech at Kansas State. This total's had some movement. Opened up 116.5. That attributed to two top 5 defensive efficiency teams in the country. But the total from 116.5 up to 120 at a lot of shops right now. Also a pick'em price at the opener. Now we're seeing 1.5 or 2 favoring Kansas State. So Texas Tech traveling to Manhattan, Kansas. How would you look to bet Texas Tech, Kansas State tonight, Robbie?
Well, situationally, it's a huge game for Texas Tech. They're off of 2 losses now. They lose to Iowa State in a close one, 68-64, but then they come back Saturday and get beat pretty soundly by Baylor, 73-62. Go to Waco and lose. I have to tell you what they're doing down there, Scott Drew and company, ever since the loss of their leading scorer and center with this 4-guard offense, much like what Kansas has been resorted to, the 4-guard offense because of the injury to their big man. But Baylor's played tremendous ever since the injury. I think it surprised a lot of people. Baylor, one of the worst shooting teams in the league until that Oklahoma State game, and all of a sudden Baylor has learned how to be able to shoot three-pointers and score points. So that loss ran the Texas Tech losing streak to 2 straight. Means this game is extremely meaningful to them, but boy, oh boy, to walk into Manhattan, Kansas at this point in time and get out of there with a victory is going to be tough. The total moves, Drew, from 116 to 120, and every day when we look at openers the evening before and then watch movements of prices, especially in totals, anything priced in this range, 116 to, let's say, 122, 123, generally speaking, it moves up. I think guys just play low totals to go over because sometimes you can make them by mistake. But sometimes, the defenses are too good to be able to get over that number, and it could be the case here. Both of these teams so efficient on the defensive end. K-State, I talked about them a little bit last week, but I was so impressed with their ability to frustrate Iowa State, which I happen to believe is one of the most talented offensive teams inside the conference. But Kansas State totally shut them down, bounced back, shut TCU down. Now, TCU was very shorthanded Saturday. K-State gets out with a 65-55 win. But still, the defensive performance was, again, very good by Kansas State. So I'd expect to see a knockdown, drag-out fight here. Kansas State at home this season, totals-wise, is 8-1 to the under. So they've been a very, very good under bet. I wouldn't be surprised if this one stays under as well. You're asking both of these teams to basically hit the 61-point mark. 61 points could be the winning number in this game. So I'd probably look that direction. I can understand the movement towards Kansas State, leaving them as a pick'em at home. To me, just presents some value despite the situational fact that Texas Tech is off 2 losses. I'm not going to play the side here because I respect Chris Beard and Texas Tech coming in with that type of hunger to get a victory. A little too much to go ahead and play K-State. But I have to tell you, since Dean Wade has returned, this is without question one of the top 4 teams in the Big 12. In the end, they could end up winning it all. A real good game, but I would think that under is the right way to go.
Guys, we're talking to Robbie Veno, hot in college basketball, 21-5, 80% in college hoops over the last 9 days. Check out sportsmemo.com for $2 Tuesday, and you can get his college basketball premier total going tonight. 4% are normally $25. Tonight, just $2 at sportsmemo.com. Robbie, heading to the Big Ten now. We got 6-2-3, 6-2-4. Minnesota at Michigan, 137.5 the total. Wolverines laying 12 at home.
Yeah, and I'm going to disagree with the line move a little bit here, Drew. We've seen the 13 pushed down to now Michigan minus 12. Some, not a bunch, but some support for the Minnesota side here. And I don't necessarily understand the reasoning behind that move. Minnesota has been and I thought this team was going to be pretty good coming into the year, and even through the early month of November, I thought this team was going to be really good. But they have hit a miserable against the spread streak right now, where they're 2-7 over the course of their last 9, and they haven't necessarily dealt with the upper echelon of the Big 12 of the Big 10 yet. I mean, their last 3 games are against Penn State, Illinois, and Rutgers. Prior to that, they played top half of the league teams in Maryland and Wisconsin. But in those 5 games, 2-3, not shooting the ball well. Over the course of their last 9 games, they've shot better than 45%, only twice. And to me, for Minnesota, for Richard Pitino's team to be successful, they have to shoot the ball well. And they've got too many guys with offensive capability, in my mind, to be shooting as poorly as they are. But something's not working there in Minnesota. Now they have to come into Michigan. Michigan off of a loss where John Beilein called it their worst performance of the year. There's probably no coach in America that bettors, handicappers respect any more than John Beilein and his ability to get the most out of his players. All of a sudden, Michigan has a loss, and we start to hear everybody nitpicking this team. Oh, they don't have enough scores. They don't have this. They don't have that, as if they were a fraud before the loss on Saturday. I'm going to attribute that game to just to the rigors of conference play, where you're going to, in a 35-game schedule overall, you're going to throw a clunker in there. Wisconsin's an extremely good defensive team still, even though they performed below expectations so far this season. I can't put a lot of credence into Michigan taking steps backwards just because of that loss. I would be more than willing to go ahead and lay the 12 points here in this game. I just don't know that Minnesota will be able to crack the code on the Michigan defense, which I would expect to be somewhat stifling here tonight. And Michigan's going to shoot better at home than what they showed the other day in Wisconsin. Power ratings make Michigan a 14.5-point favorite here, so just a little more incentive to go ahead and play the Michigan side.
Robbie, heading back to the SEC, 6:29, 6:30, 8:30 Eastern tip here. Texas A&M travels to Gainesville to take on the Florida Gators. 134 the total. Gators laying 11.5 in the O-Dome.
Yeah, the reason why I picked this one to talk about here on the podcast, Drew, was the fact that the total has flown in this particular game from an opener of 128.5, which indicates the defensive nature of the Florida Gators. But now, as you said, up to 134, 133.5, 134 in some spots. You're talking about a 5.5 point move in a total, which I think the idea behind that is that Texas A&M's shortcomings on defense outweigh what Florida does as a defensive-minded team. I think that A&M ability to let the other team score leads guys to believe that 128.5 is not that hard to make. We'll go ahead and play it over. Could be out of range right now at 134. Texas A&M is not the straightest shooting bunch inside the SEC for sure. Their effective field goal percentage at 44.7 ranks 12th out of 14 teams according to Ken Pom numbers. So you're talking about an offensive team in conference play. And anybody who's watched them would know this anyway. Just don't shoot the ball consistently well, and they're consistently poor, to tell you the truth, as far as shooting the basketball goes. Not a good three-point shooting team, worst in the league. Florida's defense should overwhelm them. I get the fact that when you're dealing strictly with numbers and you're looking strictly at averages and you're seeing that, Florida at home is a little bit higher scoring team. I think their game totals come close to, if not above, 137 in home contests this year. A&M, a 3-0 team over the total on the road, and a team that has averaged, their game totals have averaged 161 on the road. But you always have to go back and check opponents. Florida is not that style of opponent. Very, very slow, very, very good defensively. Game could still get over because 133.5, 134 is an extremely low number. But I wonder how much Texas A&M can really score in this game. So for me, I think the reason to talk about this game was just to point out some of the numbers and the real increase. Probably one of the hardest bet totals of the day here has been Texas A&M and Florida, and I think really it's just due to the fact that the number started out so low.
Talking to Robbie Veno. Follow him on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. Check out his page on sportsmemo.com. He's got a free play in the NBA on Portland Trailblazers at the Oklahoma City Thunder. So you can read that at sportsmemo.com under his handicapper page. That's going tonight. Check that out for free on sportsmemo.com. Also, college basketball been hot, 80% last 9 days. Also, his upper tier 4 and 5% plays on a 14-2 run. That's 88% the last 11 days, and that's what his play is on tonight. The $2 special play for $2 Tuesday on sportsmemo.com. His college basketball premiere total of the night, normally $25. Just $2 tonight at sportsmemo.com. Great day to check it out. Robbie, 2 more games we're going to talk about on tonight's slate, then some look-aheads to Wednesday's card. We got 6:33, 6:34, 9 p.m. Eastern tip. Duke at Pittsburgh. Blue Devils off of a huge win, arguably the biggest win of the college basketball season. Laying doubles on the road, though. Robbie, 12.5 now, 156 the total in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to bring the talk on this game, Drew, to the total. Opened at 152.5, moves up to 156. You know, yesterday when I did the power ratings during the middle of the afternoon for Tuesday's games before I saw any openers, I had kind of highlighted this game as one that I might try to play over the number. Then the total came, and then it got pushed way up. And then I re-examined, went back, looked at this game, and now I have to tell you I'm leaning more toward under 156. You can get a 156.5 at Heritage for those who have an account there, and I'm sure there are other 56.5s out there. But, you know, when you start really thinking about this particular game, and I understand Duke is a high-tempo team, and Pittsburgh under Jeff Capel has been a faster-paced team and a more effective offensive team, but they've both been really, really good on the defensive end. Kind of surprising for a Duke team that features so many freshmen in key roles, but they have been good defensively for Coach K, which hasn't necessarily been the case in recent years. There's been a lot of years where Duke has been a poor defensive team. Not the case here. A shorthanded Duke team that comes off such a huge and physical win against Virginia on Saturday, to me, has to have a little bit taken out of it for this game. I just can't believe that they would have the same 100% focus that they had Saturday, that they would have the same physical mentality that they had against Virginia Saturday. That game was so hyped up, and it turned out to live up to its billing for sure. But I just think when you come off a game like that, a couple days later, probably a bit of a letdown. Maybe jump shooting legs are gone a little bit. And Pittsburgh is going to be waiting, and especially with Jeff Capel as the head coach, we all know he played for Coach K at Duke. The place is going to be crazy here tonight, and Pittsburgh's played pretty good defense as well. To me, this game has the makings of one where the winner walks away with 75 points, and that certainly would bring this thing under the number. I would generally look that way. I'm not so sure, and we know Trey Jones won't play again tonight for Duke, so like I say, Duke's going to be shorthanded for the third game now. But I'm not so sure that Duke is going to be able to score enough and keep Pittsburgh down enough to be able to cover a number like 12.5. So maybe two-sided here. I like the under a little bit more than the game itself, but to play Pittsburgh at plus 12.5 at home, I could understand it. The only concern I would have is, boy, Pitt hasn't been in this position in a long, long time, and whether or not they can handle it, we'll see.
Yeah, it's a tough bet to make, but I'm with you. Just kind of, I guess, not looking to back the popular, trendy favorite here, Duke, after a big loss. You bring up Capel. I read a quote earlier, Coach K, just saying, pretty much high praises of how he's part of the Duke family, things like that. Not exactly a win one for the Gipper type of speech. And I doubt, if Duke's got them, by the maybe the 15-point mark with five minutes left, that might have backdoor cover written all over it. Not to mention Pittsburgh's, beaten Louisville, they've beaten Florida State, not necessarily the caliber of Duke, but two quality teams there. So it's not a doormat in this Pittsburgh program, especially at home, catching 12 and a half. I'm on Pittsburgh personally. Robbie, one more 9 p.m. game here, Mississippi at Alabama, 151 the total in the SEC. Pick'em -1, that's favoring Alabama at home.
Yeah, and I picked this game, Drew, just as a last-minute one to talk about, only because for anybody who follows me at Twitter, you will notice that there's been 2 or 3 times where I just can't help myself but tweet about the job that Kermit Davis is doing at Ole Miss. And no disrespect to Andy Kennedy whatsoever, because he was a tremendous basketball coach for that university for a lot of years. And maybe they'd be doing this good with Andy Kennedy as well. But for Kermit Davis, the turnaround here at Ole Miss has been drastic. To see them playing the way they're playing, along with the way LSU is playing in SEC play right now, really makes that a difficult conference night in and night out. And Avery Johnson's Alabama team, no slouch either. Alabama off of a very, very tough game on Saturday, but the improvement in offense for the Alabama Crimson Tide has been really, really noticeable. Right now, 6-1 over the total in home games is Alabama. 3-1 over the total in road games is Ole Miss. Both teams feature squads that can score points, which really surprised me a little bit to see the total go down. We see a 152 opener down to 151, and in some places 150 and a half. And a little bit head scratching there, Drew, because I think both of these teams have shown us that they can go with pace, that they can find ways to the rim, that they can score from 3-point range. Both have really good backcourt scoring available to them. The job that John Petty was doing the other day was tremendous until he finally got shut down at the end of the game. So, a lot of attributes and accolades from me thrown towards what Ole Miss has done, but the same should be thrown toward Alabama. If you're just looking at them overall this year, they're 12-4 over the total in the 16 games that they've played that have been lined with a total. So that's a far cry from what we've seen out of Avery Johnson's team last couple of years. I may look to get involved here later on over the 50 and a half. If it comes down even another tick more, I probably will get involved. I could see a higher scoring game than what we're looking at right now with this total.
All right, Robbie, great breakdown of the Tuesday card. Guys, remember it's $2 Tuesday at sportsmemo.com. The top play, which is a CBB premier total from Robbie Veno, just $2. Check that out. Robbie, what about Wednesday's college basketball card? And guys, if you haven't been following along, we've been posting Rob Veno's power ratings on sportsmemo.com under the news tab pretty much every day for the day before in college basketball, so you can compare the openers and see maybe where the line's going to move. It's a great resource if you're a college basketball bettor. But we do have some big games, 7-9-3, 7-9-4, Texas, TCU. Also Tennessee at Vanderbilt, rivalry of sorts there. The Shula Bowl, FIU, FAU as well. East Carolina versus Houston, UCF, Tulane. Robbie, is there any kind of games you want to throw out for Wednesday's card with your power ratings that might be a little off from the openers from the odds makers?
Well, we'll see when those openers come, Drew. But I will say this. The first game that you mentioned, TCU and Texas, now, when TCU went to Kansas State on Saturday, we know Jalen Fisher's gone for the season. Now, that wasn't a surprise to not have him on the floor. But, Kouat Noi came up with an illness, the second leading scorer on the team, and that hurt TCU on Saturday. So you would check his status if, in fact, he's okay and he's going to go in Wednesday's game, which to me it looks like, reading between the lines, what I've tried to go ahead and figure out here through the internet. It looks like he's going to be able to go. And if he does, I have to tell you, Drew, K-State, and I sang their praises a lot in an earlier analysis, and they did play well in the 65-55 win on Saturday. But that being said, TCU hung around all game long without 2 of their top 4 players on the floor. Alex Robinson is absolutely tremendous as a point guard, and Desmond Bain shooting the threes. I think they could be a live play against Texas. I don't know that Shaka Smart's team is going to be able to handle TCU's offense if Noy is back. So I'm anxious to see where that number comes. My power ratings show TCU as a home favorite of -6. If I get something in that range for an opener, I'll probably be there. If it comes a little higher than that, probably not. And, of course, the deciding factor is if Noy is in the game or not. But I'm going to venture to say that he will be in. The Florida Atlantic game, can you play any faster than FIU plays? I mean, that is the fastest team. I thought Savannah State was fast out of the MEAC, but FIU has really gone to a extreme tempo this season. It's paid off in some instances. It hasn't in others. But we will see where odds makers line this game. I have FAU as a 2-point favorite at home right now. We'll see where the total comes in that game. I'd also probably point out from the American Athletic tomorrow, East Carolina at Houston. Houston at home off of a nice win on Saturday. This is a team that is really, really good and obviously power rated at the top of this conference. I have them a couple of points ahead of Cincinnati, which is a pretty wide gap when you're talking about Conference 1 and 2s. But to me, when you get to that situation and you have to continually lay monstrous point spreads against undermanned teams, it's worth looking at the underdog, and especially if you think you have a live underdog. What's happening at East Carolina recently has been pretty good. Anybody who's watched them, you can see that there's an uptick in their play, and they're not the doormat coming to town that they were last year. So, Jeff Lebo's last year was a real disaster there. East Carolina since has changed head coaches. They look a lot better to me. I have Houston as a 20-point favorite power ratings-wise in that game. I think if you can catch 20 points, East Carolina on the road is really worth a play here. So we'll see where that number comes out. Other stuff I'm probably not remembering what you had for other games here, but we know there's a lot going on in the A-10 tomorrow. Missouri Valley, not one of my favorite conferences, but certainly there's a lot of play going on there. And a couple of SEC stragglers. But for big-name games, I guess, not as many as tonight for sure, Drew. There's a couple of them. Oklahoma State, Bedlam will be good as well. I show Oklahoma as a 1.5-point favorite on the road in that contest.
Great stuff, Robbie. Do you have anything for UC Irvine versus Hawaii?
I do. I show Irvine as a 0.5-point favorite, so we'll probably see something around pick. Irvine, once again, power rated the best team in that league, but Hawaii within the top 3, and certainly home floor advantage has been meaningful for Hawaii so far this season. So we'll see where that number comes. If you can, maybe Irvine gets overpriced there and you can catch a home dog with Hawaii.
Great stuff, Robbie, like always. And, we'll have Robbie back on Friday's podcast going over the Saturday look-aheads. Again, the Saturday card, one of my favorite and one of, the days where the odds makers have the most to do as far as setting lines, totals for the college basketball slate on Saturdays. Over 200 teams playing Saturdays. So we'll have Robbie on Friday afternoon going after some of that slate. Robbie, anything else you want to throw out before we shut this down?
Boy, I think we covered it pretty good, Drew. There'll be more to talk about when openers come, but we won't be on the pod. So hopefully, we've gone through enough here to help people out that are listening. That's always the goal with the podcast. And when we get together later in the week, we'll do that for Saturday slate.
Absolutely, Robbie. And feel free to reach out to Robbie on Twitter at @RobVenoSports or myself at Drew Martin Betts. And let us know what you want to hear about on Saturday's podcast, which games. Also, any handicapping questions, life help questions, whatever you want to ask, we'll answer on the podcast. Feel free to reach out to us on Twitter, Robbie at @RobVenoSports or myself at Drew Martin Betts. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Best of luck with your bets. We'll talk tomorrow, NHL.